We're here to destroy surveillance capitalism. We've had it with advertisers and advertising and all your profiles. There's a lot to unpack here.
And that might seem ambitious, but when you're taking on a titan like targeted advertising and the industry that we find ourselves in, the best time to attack is when they are wounded. And boy, the targeted advertising world is showing some wounds recently.
Yeah. GDPR, the California consumer law, leaks like the Equifax leaks. This is finally top of mind for a lot of the regular people. But let's talk about it, because we think there's enough of us that we can actually affect a positive change for the future. Well, I do.
I don't. But we'll talk more about that. And the other big thing, the other Achilles heel, perhaps, that is showing is that there might be some fraud going down. There might be a lot of fraud in the advertising world.
The Uber article about $100 million of click fraud, that's just the tip of the iceberg. We've worked on big data systems. Some agencies get it. Some agencies definitely do not get it. It's like, your data, your advertising profile, it's like crack cocaine. They don't know they have a problem. They can't put it down.
And it is probably killing their business model. So we're going to talk about, just in case you guys don't know the scope of it, we're going to talk about what the advertising profile is, how it affects you, how it's built, why it is a time bomb, essentially, and what can we do about it.
So in order to understand this, you got to look at what is your advertising profile. Now, a lot of our audience has some idea of what the advertising profile is, but I'm willing to bet there's gaps and holes in exactly what that is. Advertising got to start, it was Edward Bernays. It was like, let's manufacture, what was it, desire, manufacture consent?
That's Chomsky.
Well, yeah.
Bernays was famous for propaganda. In those days, it wasn't a bad word.
And, he was, Sigmund Freud's nephew? And
some relation to him.
He founded it's a whole other video to talk about advertising and how that goes. But
women smoking,
yeah,
bacon and eggs. I had another really big one.
It was like the pork industry is like, we're not selling these pork bellies. What can we do? And he's like, let's make bacon a thing. And I don't know. I like bacon, but do I really like bacon, or is it a glitch in the matrix? I don't know. The promise of the advertising profile was to bring that into the 21st century. In the past, if you wanted to reach the audience of a particular newspaper, you advertised in that newspaper. Well, the promise of an advertising profile that is built for you, not by you, and that you have no control over, is that it will show you ads that are relevant to you, things that you might possibly be interested in, things that could possibly improve your life. Now, at a very basic level, it could be what websites you visit. Let's say that I want to advertise to you, but man, I can't afford the banner ad fees on the Level 1 website. But I also know that you go to 4chan, and 4chan is a lot cheaper than Level 1. So because I've got your advertising profile and I know 2 websites that you visit, I can advertise to you on a website that costs less. The service in the middle that's providing that service, they grift a little bit on the top, and everything works well theoretically. But the reality is a lot different from that.
The reality of the advertising profile, and if you've ever gone to a website that had a GDPR warning or manage cookies or something like that, you'll kind of see where it's like, hey, we want to make sure that we show you the ads that mean something to you, and that's why we do this. That is always a lie. Because the advertising profile is not about you at all in terms of the customer. And a lot of people have said this before, but with Facebook, for example, you are not the customer. You are the product.
You're cattle.
And what we mean by that is the customer is the advertising industry, and the product that they're buying is the views. And the way that they're buying that, the way that they're shopping online, is through that advertising profile. So they want to advertise to somebody who makes $250,000 a year. How do you do that? Do you put your ad in Forbes magazine? Well, that was the old way. The new way is you go on Facebook and you say, hey, I want to know who makes $250,000, and I want to show them this ad.
Now, in order to get that data, you got to, hoover up a bunch of data. And you may be thinking, oh, it's just the website forms that I fill out. I'm really good about clearing my cookies. Yeah, Google and Facebook have noticed that. That's why companies like that have been purchasing like your credit card purchase history. They also purchase your voter history, which is public information technically. A lot of DMVs, we've done news stories where DMVs are literally selling your information. So all of a sudden they know what car you drive, what your registration information is, your physical address, even if you're using a PO box, your purchase history from your credit cards, which will give you some idea of how fiscally responsible you are, maybe even how much income you have. Because if you're buying $5,000 of crap and then paying that credit card off every month, chances are you got a lot of disposable income. All of that data, any data they can get is hoovered up and put in your profile. Gmail, looking at things like receipts, and it's like, oh, let me just helpfully group these emails that look like receipts into this receipts thing. You better believe machine learning is going through those purchases and getting a lot more out of that than it is for you. That wasn't done for your convenience. That was done to mine data.
One of our favorite examples is for Twitter, for example. When we first started doing this, we were looking at our Twitter followers. And Twitter will let you drill down into who drinks milk, who buys milk once a week. So
it also lets you drill down into who's lactating, which is surprising.
The number of things that the profile knows about you is near limitless, but it's also never enough for them. They will never stop invading your life to get these details, because the more details they have, the better their product is.
You also can't see your profile at all, or make changes to it, or corrections, or just hide information that you don't want to be a part of your profile.
Or get rid of it.
Unlike your credit report. I mean, even your credit report, you have some control over at least, but your online
dispute.
Your online advertising profile, you got nothing.
There is no dispute. Yes, you're stuck with it.
There's also multiple competing companies. Some companies, knowing that this is a little bit of a game of hot potato in the GDPR world, are even now just selling you the tools to allow companies to collect data themselves. That's a landmine, because eventually that data is going to leak. But we'll talk more about that.
This creates a situation. We always knew that advertising was annoying. It was kind of a necessary evil. I mean, all of our TV that we watched growing up, that was ad-driven.
It funds the internet.
A lot of stuff is ad-driven. This is ad-driven in a lot of ways. Yeah. But we're getting to the point where ads are no longer an annoyance. I mean, they're still an annoyance, but they're actually a huge danger now, because the amount of data that is known is identity theft and stuff like that. And the problem is, we have seen time and time again, they cannot secure it.
No, it's super easy to take the advertising profile and do a convincing spearfish, or to do a convincing thing to steal from you. I mean, we know that these types of data leaks have led to spies getting killed, which is, a big deal. Okay, maybe that was a counterintelligence operation. Joe Citizen doesn't have anything to worry about that. No, the recent Ledger leak, just ordinary people dealing in cryptocurrency are getting emails and threats from criminals, because in that leak was their full name and their address and all of the stuff that the government requires for people that are dealing with cryptocurrency, which is maybe perhaps a bit short-sighted. Those people got really threatening emails like, I know you trade this much in this much cryptocurrency. I know where you live. Here's your exact address. You can just pay me off and you'll never hear from me again. Or, live in the threat that I could break into your house and make you turn over your cryptocurrency or anything like that. There's a lot of really detailed information going into your advertising profile. I mean, your mortgage, your credit card transactions, as we said. This is exceptionally dangerous. This is why these kinds of things must not be built in the first place. This is why we see laws like the GDPR law in California. But a lot of companies are, desperate to hang on to this, crack cocaine. They're addicted to it, and they can't put it down. They think that it's doing something good for them.
And every time this thing leaks, I mean, you got to think about, in the early days of your advertising profile, they knew very little about you. They might have known your age, maybe your gender, whatever, but it just kept growing. And the problem is that leaks. And when it leaks, it's out there forever. So all I have to do if I'm a Facebook is like, oh, let's take a look at this leak. Let's use this leak to build our profile. So it's kind of a snowball effect. And you have to wonder how many rotations of the snowball before all privacy is just gone.
Not only that, but again, you have no control over it. I mean, right now it thinks Ryan is an octogenarian.
I get a lot of retirement related stuff in my physical mail. Somehow my profile has been set at a high age. I don't know how.
Oops. Yeah, it just totally doesn't make sense. And then we see these new articles coming out about like, oh, Uber stopped their online advertising. They cut it by $100 million and they didn't see any change. eBay cut all of their Google advertising. They didn't see any change in their revenue or site traffic or click-throughs, anything like that. Now, I'll contend that the kind of advertising that we do at level 1 is very different than what is being done through ad profiles and click agencies and things like Google Ads. But yeah, it seems like it's all rotten to the core, and it's all just a grift. It's like, look at this big data. We were able to correlate it to these sales. There's some really big numbers here, but
that is perhaps the silver lining, because there is probably nothing that will stop this juggernaut unless it turns out that the advertisers are not getting what they're paying for. And this could be the time to strike. So if the big advertisers learn that this is fraudulent, and we have some pretty good evidence that this targeted advertising is not targeting who it should be, then maybe we can do something else. But the question is, what do you replace it with?
Now, here's just a run-of-the-mill website. Let's look at the cookies it generated and session traffic. All you got to do here is just right-click Inspect, go to your Network tab, look at your cookie session. Oh my gosh, look at this. Dozens and dozens of cookies. It's like, oh yes, we control consent. They make it easy to accept all, but if you want to reject these cookies, you got to click them one at a time. Nobody wants to do that. So the alternative to this can only be an advertising profile that you control. I mean, look how long it took for your credit report to become a thing that wasn't, a backroom deal. You imagine like, business owners, like the mob in a room playing poker, and they're all smoking cigars, and it's just really terrible. And that was where your credit report was, basically. Well, it's like that now with your advertising profile. There's no reason that it has to be locked behind closed doors. You should be able to see it. You should be able to make corrections to it. You should be able to hide parts of it that you don't want people to see. If you don't want to show your political affiliation or your voting history or your income or anything like that, turn it off. But you should be able to control it. You should also be able to add to it. You're in the market for a lawnmower. You're willing to accept advertisements about lawnmowers, or you just bought a new house and it's like, oh yeah, I did just buy a new house. Advertisements about that would be really interesting. And then after you've bought a lawnmower, you can say, no, I'm not interested in seeing that anymore. Because have you ever bought anything on Amazon and in the next 3 weeks, every website you go to is an Amazon ad for something that you already bought? That's how dumb this stuff is. If you want it to be effective advertising, you're going to need some kind of a mechanism like this. Otherwise, it's just fraud. It's just grifting. It's just stealing money from the advertisers. You need some kind of functionality about this. You've got to have, control of it, maybe, through your smartphone, or, maybe something for that's a centralized nonprofit. Maybe it's a group of companies. I mean, we kind of have a group of companies now for your credit report. It's not a great system, but it's better than what we have right now for your online advertising profile.
Now, I might be thinking, this is not a new idea. Was it Honey, the browser plugin, Honey?
Yes.
That did, not exactly, but similar to what we're talking about. And what happened to Honey?
They got bought by PayPal.
Somebody bought it and turned it into an advertising profile. So we strongly believe this needs to be, open for sure, because we need to know how it works, and we need to not have any horrible group in charge of it. But beyond that, even it's such a utopian dream, the advertising world is not going to give up their model unless they have a gun to their head. And the guns...
That's where we come in.
I think the guns look like legislation like GDPR.
Yeah.
We can't really control that. You can sort of affect it, but not really. Democracy and capitalism.
It also gives us an opportunity to forbid certain kinds of information from being on your profile. Things like your unionization stuff, because we see Amazon using their customer profile data in their anti-unionization efforts against their own employees. Blatantly illegal.
The other gun to their head will be that the current system doesn't work. I think the best chance we have are these headlines about Unilever turning it off and noticing no difference in sales.
And Uber and eBay and a whole bunch of other companies.
They see nothing. They see that advertising is a waste of money. And could a better model usurp that? I think it could. Another thing that I think has to be a part of it is that the customer has to be rewarded for interacting with their profile in some way.
Yeah.
And I think companies would go with that.
Yeah.
If you get a motivated consumer, that's worth something. That's worth a discount or a freebie or something like that. And that's where things like Honey sort of excelled.
Speaking of honey, one way that we can control this technologically is with honeypot profiles. We can create fake people that if something happens with them, we know that an advertiser has used that data incorrectly. Kind of like honeypot phone numbers. Before the FCC was highly ineffective, there were phone numbers that when you called, if a robocaller called it or something like that, it might result in a fine or an investigation because it's like, hey, no one is supposed to get, automated calls at this number. We supplied this number to such and such company, and then we got a robocall. We know who leaked it. It's basically a sting operation.
This technology could also give consumers some power in terms of grouping them together and letting them create little subcultures, which is kind of what influencer advertising is now.
Yes.
But with a structure.
The good kind of influencer advertising, not the bad kind.
Well, you get both kinds. But hopefully this sort of open environment would filter the best to the top and eliminate the bad.
Yeah, I mean, some of the really early Bernays advertising was basically, hey, we're going to pay you to smoke on cameras. Like, you just won the Olympics. What would you say to smoking when you're being interviewed? Would you take $10,000 to do that?
It was the suffragettes marching. It was during suffrage marches. That's how bad it was.
Yeah, so that's kind of a return to the roots of advertising, but, that's okay. Everybody's online is already jaded to advertising anyway. Nobody sees the ads because they're all in the same place.
And in this system, you know what's coming up front.
Yeah.
You know it's an ad. You know it's going to be a part of your life. Yeah, maybe you're not crazy about it, but you get some control, and I think that will make consumers a lot more accepting of them.
Yeah. Now, I think it can work.
I don't.
Yeah.
Well, it could work, but it's going to take an absolute catastrophe in the current advertising world, and perhaps we're on the cusp of that.
Perhaps with the current global situation, we're getting just such a catastrophe. Yeah, I think the lessons have already been lost in terms of like the advertising end of it, because a lot of like when you read propaganda and you read some of the stuff that the Bernays did, it makes a lot of sense. And when you look at what advertisers are doing today, it doesn't make as much sense.
Advertising, essentially, if you want to boil it down, advertising creates a desire that you didn't know you had. And in this system, that's one of the big problems with this system that I see, because I use the example of bagel bites. When I was a kid, bagel bites were on TV between like 5 times during every cartoon. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
I mean, they were everywhere. Would you ever even realize that bagel bites existed if not for those commercials?
No, but I am aware of bagel bites, and I'm also aware that they're awful.
They are terrible. They're god awful. I think the advertising is the only thing that sold them. But we're like companies that have brand new products or companies that want to try to sell you something that you don't want remains a problem that this doesn't solve.
Or the infomercial style. It's like, do you have this problem? It's like, oh yeah, I totally do have this problem. Buy this product that only marginally improves your situation with that problem.
What about the sham wow?
Yeah.
It's totally lost here. So there's definitely some blind spots that need to be filled in. But again, compare this utopian solution to the reality, it's probably worth fighting for.
Yeah, and also some of the stuff that we said is definitely citation needed. So there are references to everything that we said. There's a lot of reading that you can do, destroy surveillance capitalism. I'm not the first person to say that, but now is as good a time as any, and especially if you're aware of it. And I think a lot of our audience is, at least on a subconscious level, aware of this kind of thing. But if we can, put a little flourish on it and point it out, maybe we'll be more effective in dealing with it head on. If you want to do a fun experiment on your own to find out how much data you have, go to your Google profile and download your own data, and then take a look at that file, because, ooh boy, it's surprising.
Another dark thing about the targeted advertising world is it's not just used inclusively to say that, hey, I want to advertise to this group of people. It can also be used exclusively to say that I don't want to do business with, for example, Hispanics. And I'm not talking out of turn there. That happened at Facebook. There were some real estate people who wanted to exclude by ethnicity.
Ooh.
Now that's not legal, but it was definitely going on.
It's not legal, and yet there haven't been any real repercussions.
No, not really. Kind of a slap on the wrist.
Just how valuable is your advertising profile really? Well, the fates of billion, near trillion-dollar companies hang in the balance. Look at the Apple versus Facebook feud.
So if you don't know about that, you may have seen some full-page ads, I think it was the New York Times, that Facebook took out, not cheap to do. And what were they saying? They were saying, oh, Apple is evil. Because Apple wants to give the consumer the option to opt out of the Facebook tracking. And Facebook, when they're talking to their investors, which is when they're telling the truth, has admitted that could be an existential danger to them, because without all the iPhones feeding back, they lose an amazing amount of money.
But not only that, the actual efficacy of this kind of advertising is highly in question. A lot of Facebook engineers, there were some more leaked documents. A lot of internal Facebook engineers say, you know, our advertising stuff is really not that good at picking out individuals. And part of the reason for that is a lot of Facebook profiles have noisy data, not from people trying to obfuscate their traffic or anything like that. It's from people that are not real people, but that are part of ad, bot, and fraud networks. So there's enough fake data there, and Facebook is not really incentivized to do anything about the fake profiles because the numbers look good to advertisers. So it's kind of a catch-22. They can't do it. They can't improve the efficacy of the advertising because there would be less of it. Now, one counter argument that comes up a lot when you're looking at this is, well, we get the data, but it's anonymized data. There is no such thing as anonymized data.
Every new column you add to that table focuses more and more on a combination that can only be one person.
Yeah.
And once you, the size of these tables, it is impossible that this data is anonymized. Another thing to keep in mind about your advertising profile is that moving forward, it's not just going to be for advertising. Now, if you're thinking about getting a home loan, for example, this could factor into that. If you're thinking about doing a variety of things, and one of the bigger, the more terrifying ones is employment, because AI is doing a lot of the hiring these days, and they might have a data set to look at that includes a lot of your advertising profile, and there might be some things in there that you don't want your employer to know.
Or that are inaccurate. Like, you know, we can't hire him because he's an octogenarian.
Exactly. It's an insurance risk.
I don't think it really works like that, but yeah, no, it totally does work like that.
It could. Now, having said all that, we do have sort of this high-level idea for a better system, and we would certainly be willing to try and build it and, you know, like get help from the community. It would be a great thing. I mean, what a great thing to go down history for, right? But the harsh reality is that no matter how good the replacement is and no matter how many people use it, if people can track you, they will. And just look at robocalling. Robocalling is illegal, right? Are you getting robocalls? It'd be the same thing. So ultimately, no matter what happens, you have to be in charge.
I mean, ultimately, your advertising profile is not a significant amount of data. It's super easy to copy it. Even just, you know, providing a screenshot of it, people would do that. There's not really a lot that you can do to stop bad actors from acting badly. It's like, oh, they got fined. Yeah, robocallers get fined too. So in the spirit of, okay, what are some alternatives beyond that? Obfuscation techniques. There's a lot that you can do electronically. There are browser plugins that will let you sort of visit websites constantly, 24 hours a day, following a profile. It'll generate believable seeming traffic. Now, fraudsters have been using this to inflate their numbers for their commissions for click-throughs and things like that. You can run a fake website with lots of fake traffic, and it's very hard to tell that traffic apart from real traffic. You can have browser plugins that essentially do the same thing with real people. That makes it really, really hard for the advertising profile to be valuable in the first place. So that's, one, you're protecting your own privacy, but two, you're devaluing the overall data set. I mean, this is sort of the subprime mortgage crisis of databases. It's like there's good profiles bundled with bad profiles, and the whole thing's basically melting down. Obfuscation is one great way to really, really accelerate that. The problem is, with things like financial transactions, your bank and your credit card companies have gone out of their way to make sure that you can't really do much anonymously. And the anonymity in things like cryptocurrencies is also going away.
Yeah, I think more and more we are moving into a world where there is no privacy, unfortunately, and this is a big reason why. But there are little things that you can do, and you should actually go through with those, as annoying as they are. For example, Netflix. I've never given them my credit card because you can buy gift cards. Just go get a gift card. Yeah, it's annoying, but Netflix doesn't know anything about me.
I don't think they know your real name, do they?
I think I did put it in there where it's like, who's watching? They know my first name. But there are a lot of little things that you can do. And, you know, like we talked about the browser plugin, there's a lot of little technologies. Encrypt your DNS. If you're not encrypting your DNS, guess what?
Your ISP
is building an amazing profile. It's incredible what they know. And unfortunately, you don't get to look at it. So things like that, encrypt everything. Try to avoid, just always be thinking about, you know, the eye of Sauron and what it's seeing, because it's not going away.
Yeah. Hopefully these tools will help you do that, but hopefully we've given you something to think about, because there's a lot you can do. There's a lot of little things that you personally can do that will contribute to a better overall situation for all of us.